Hello and welcome to episode 285 of the Total Saints podcast, your home for all things Southampton FC. A huge thanks to the TSP patron community. We couldn't make the show each week without your support. On that note, we've had a few additions over the summer, so a huge welcome to Dan Getliff, Keir McCartney, who have both joined our Bobby Stokes tier, and to James Robin, who has kindly joined our Mick Shannon tier for the next 2 seasons. Honourable mention to James's wife Francesca, who bought a TSP patronage for his birthday, which was on July the 24th. So a belated happy birthday to you, James. And hello to their 2 sons, who we are both told are quickly becoming TSP superfans. Great to have you all with us this season. Coming up on the podcast, we'll be looking back at our final 2 games of pre-season, our Saints short of firepower, and our thoughts ahead of the new Premier League season. Are the Saints ready? And we welcome Sam Dalling from True Faith, the Newcastle United podcast, as we preview the 359-mile trip to St James's Park as we kick off the new campaign with the longest away trip of the season. My name is Martin Sanders, and I'm delighted to be in the hot seat this evening, filling in for my namesake, Martin. Some of you may already know me as Football Martin, a mad TikToker, a YouTuber who is obsessed with Southampton Football Club, and I have been for the last 38 years. I'm thrilled to be joined this evening by Steve Grant, the owner of Saints Web, Glen, the writer of the blog League 1-10, and Alfie House, senior Southampton reporter for the Daily Echo. So let's get into the show. Glen, we played our last pre-season home games this week. Yesterday, a 0-0 draw against Getafe. Also, that 1-1 draw on Wednesday versus Lazio. Glenn, what have we learnt from the last 2 games other than picking very dirty teams to play against?
It's kind of been a theme of pre-season because I remember Alfie saying from the Spanish trip that Montpellier were a little bit like that as well. And, it's an interesting one. I had a discussion with Steve on Wednesday night when we went to the Lazio game about pre-season and how, what sort of opposition you play against. You see all the big Premier League teams going over to America or whatever and playing against each other. And some of the mid-ranking Premier League teams sort of went and played their own tournament against each other as well. And I kind of wonder if what's the best way to go. There's probably pros and cons of both approaches. Or do you just play whoever's available? But Lazio were dirty from minute 1. We kind of had what you call our fringe players playing. Nice for Ben Brereton Diaz to get a goal, which was kind of his trademark goal, cut along the top of the penalty area and smash it in the corner. That was a nice start to the game. Good equaliser by Lazio, and we seem to spend most of the rest of the game trying to give the goal away with some very dodgy looking passing out from the back. But all the game will be remembered for, of course, is the punch up, which was, you don't get those in friendlies or you shouldn't get them in friendlies unless, people have been leaving their foot in and it's been a bit niggly right from the start. And I think Charlie Alcaraz just kind of lost it and saw an opportunity to pile in and took it. And it made it a little bit more memorable than it otherwise would have been. The Getafe game, I didn't really think it was possible to find a more niggly team than Lazio, but then this is a team that gave Mason Greenwood a game last year, so maybe we shouldn't really be surprised at how grim their attitude towards it was. Game itself, we put the first team out, and I know we'll get into this later. It was dull, to be honest. As a game of football, it was pretty dull with not a lot happening. We looked decent in the back half of the pitch and didn't look particularly great going forward. Missed a couple of chances, which I think would have, if we'd stuck one away, would have papered over the cracks a little bit. But neither game was the best in terms of entertainment. But it's one of the reasons I don't really enjoy pre-season games. There always seems to be a little bit less in everyone's intensity than you need to actually make it a decent game. But good to get through them with no sort of like major injuries. I think we picked up the injury to Kamaldeen Sulemana, but very unlikely that he would have featured anyway. So yeah, all good going into the first game next week.
Yeah, Steve, were you concerned about the lack of firepower? Certainly, in the last 2 games yesterday, looked very toothless in the final third, didn't we?
Yeah, it's a slight concern because while obviously you make the step up, you're not going to be as creative as we were against Championship defences, but also you're not going to get as the chances aren't going to be as clear cut. So you've got to be a lot more clinical. Obviously, Brereton Diaz was clinical with his finish on Wednesday night. Excellent finish from the position that he picked the ball up in. Slightly obliging defence, I thought, for that particular move, but he's finished it really well, and we're going to need a lot of that because, obviously, Adam Armstrong had a couple of openings second half yesterday where one was decent bit of defending from the centre back, and the other one he's probably snatched it a little bit and put it just past the post. But it was one of those scenarios where back end of last season you'd have absolutely stuck your mortgage on him scoring it. So we've just kind of got to hope that mindset is backing him on Saturday when we go to St James's Park. I mean, it's obviously a ground he knows well. So yeah, that's the hope. But yeah, I think we lack a little bit going forward, and the problem with that is always that if you don't cause the opposition sort of enough issues defensively, then it means that they kind of have the confidence to step forward and push onto you a little bit more. And we know what our defence is like in those situations. I think defensively, for the most part last season, I think we were kind of fine in games where we were able to score first and dictate the game. Like certainly in that long unbeaten run, I think we only conceded like 13, 14 goals in those 20, 25 games. But in games where we concede first, all of a sudden the game then has to open up and we then leave more spaces in behind. And I think ultimately those sort of scenarios are probably going to be more likely with the step up in quality. Certainly against a side like Newcastle, I mean they scored a silly amount of goals last season. Isak's a big problem. Actually quite surprised he's still there, because I thought he might be the guy that they basically cash in on in order to kind of fill up the rest of the team with better players, but he's still there at the moment. So he's a worry for me, because he's got that sort of annoying combination of pace, power, strength, and talent. It's absolutely hateful when you come up against people like that, isn't it, in all walks of life. And yeah, he's going to be a problem, and we've got to find a way of dealing with it. Obviously, looks like we're going to go with 3 at the back to start the season, and yeah, that midfield is going to be heavily worked in terms of making sure that back 3 or 5 is well protected, because it's going to need to be especially against Newcastle. But I mean, even against sides like Forest, who we shipped goals against at the City Ground 2 years ago. You're going to have to be everybody's going to have to be on their game from the start. Otherwise, it could be a long old season.
Alfie, do you feel that Russell's trying to make us a bit harder to beat? He certainly turned things around in the playoff campaign, didn't he? We were leaking a lot of goals in the run into the playoff campaign, conceded just the 1, but overall for the season we let 64 goals in. Last time round in the Premier League, 73. We're going to need to be a lot better defensively. Do you think it's something he's really aware of?
Yeah, I don't know. If you asked him, he would say that no, he hasn't sort of put a defensive focus first. But I think they've looked quite good at the back actually in the preseason games. I think that's probably just come from familiarity of the players, and obviously Taylor Hudbell's coming in, Jan Bednarek's still there. I think the only problems they've really had are ones they've sort of self-inflicted, and that's just passing straight to the opposition again. We saw that maybe once against Getafe, a couple of times in the preseason game before I went. So I think they're the biggest issues at the moment. I think it's obvious that they conceded 63 goals or whatever it was. I can't remember in the Championship. If they defend in a similar manner, they're obviously going to concede a lot more. You can't get away with that. You're not going to score 65 goals in the Premier League season. I'd be very surprised. So I think they've got to be better at the back, but I think they will be. I think they've obviously worked together for a long time. They are more familiar. They've got Flynn Downs back in. And obviously Carl Walker-Peters is back, which however long that lasts, we don't know. But he's clearly a massive upgrade on anybody else in the position. But yeah, I don't know if Russell Martin would say that they're focusing solely on that, but I think there has to be a sort of subconscious effort to keep things tight. Winning those games sort of 1-0. When Nottingham Forest came to St Mary's a couple of years ago under Nathan Jones, and they won that game 1-0. But yeah, exactly. But that's the result. Those are results that kept them in the division ultimately. You need to win games like that. So yeah, obviously there's an element of that.
No, it's interesting that you say. Russell spoke about selling players before we could buy any. Glen, we're coming into a week for the kickoff of the season. Do you feel business could potentially be done this week, or do you think it looks very difficult because there's dead wood to be moved on, isn't there?
There is. It's when managers make statements like that, you never really know if they're telling the truth or whether they're playing games or and trying to get whoever to loosen the purse strings and things like that, or because I don't really see what good it does other than setting expectations for fans. Because if you say you've got to sell before you can buy, that gives out the impression to a Trabzonspor, for example, that we're getting pretty desperate, so we may deal at a lower value. It's a strange one. I mean, we all know that we haven't got loads of money. We all know that, despite playing yesterday, Tall Paul, he's not really wanted. We all know that Bella Kotchap wants to go, and these are players that could fetch 20 million quid between them, and that would make things a lot easier, especially if you're chasing players that, like we've been talking about Matt O'Reilly for ages. If we sign him, that's going to cost 20 million plus, and it's we could obviously do with the money coming in to have a better chance of making that a reality. Unfortunately, we've had to spend 40 million to keep the squad, to keep the team as good as it was last year with Harwood Bellis and Downs. We've signed a couple of sort of like cheap centre halves. Sugawara was relatively cheap. Charlie Taylor was a free. That we do, and Adam Lallana as well. Who can forget about that? But I mean, we unfortunately as we kind of hinted at earlier, the places where we need to sign players are the expensive parts of the pitch. So if we're looking to sign a number 9 striker or a creative midfielder, we're going to have to spend the money, and we do need to get these players out the door to make that more likely, I would say.
Yeah, it looks that way to me. And the chat around the ground yesterday, I was chatting to fans for my channel, and everybody was talking about goalkeeper, striker, and creative midfielder, which is going to cost money. There's no doubt about that. Russell spoke about bringing in character, Steve, over talent. We had a lot of bad eggs last time around in the Premier League, in my opinion. I may be wrong in saying that, but I thought there was a lot of bad eggs in the dressing room. Do you feel like a team built on character and unity is going to be just enough?
No. I mean, you look at Luton for that. They were a team full of unity, and they got relegated. And it would have been very comfortably relegated if Everton and Forest hadn't had points deducted. So no, I mean, you've got to combine it with talent as well. And I think ultimately no sane Premier League football. I mean, I know we're talking about a league that has Chelsea and their current transfer nonsense going on, but no sane Premier League football club signs players solely because they're good in the dressing room. They've got to be able to add something on the pitch, and yeah, I think we're looking at, as you say, those key positions of goalkeeper, either attacking midfielder or wide sort of winger, and centre forward. I think those positions are key, and I think in terms of characters, I think you can always. I think it's quite easy to work out which players don't fancy it. You look at where they've played before, what their backgrounds are in that sense. Do they have any experience of having to kind of grind things out? If they haven't, then you probably can't really make a judgment one way or the other on those sort of players. So I think you're probably going to be looking at players who have been in our sort of situation before, but players possibly with a point to prove. So you do then naturally reduce the price of those sort of players, but you're probably then kind of sort of poking around in sort of bargain basement baskets and things like that, aren't you? You're not necessarily going to be getting someone who's going to come in and make a huge difference, but you just want those sort of little sort of, it's horrible sort of Dave Brailsford marginal gains stuff, isn't it? You want someone who can just make that little fractional difference in key moments. And I mean, from what we've seen, Brereton Diaz looks like he might be that sort of player. His record for Sheffield United in a god awful team last year, second half of the season when they were absolutely doomed, and he still came up with good numbers. That bodes very well, I think. But we need more of the same. Adam Armstrong, as I mentioned, was a slight concern, and of course we've seen his record in the Premier League. Maybe the system that we're playing gets more out of him, obviously, as it did last season, but he's still got that sort of blot on his copybook, if you like, of 2 seasons with 4 or 5 goals. So it's difficult in that sense. You've got to kind of almost trust your instincts one way or the other on that, I suspect, and suck it and see. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Do you think he can step up, Steve? Do you think he can step up next season, Adam Armstrong?
I don't know. I mean, the thing is, when the goalposts don't move, they're the same size regardless of what level you play at. And if he's getting into the positions and we feed him the chances, then sure, why not? But the problem is that he's going to have a lot fewer chances at this level than he did last. So that's the key. Whether a I don't know, sort of 1 in 3 chance conversion. I can't remember the numbers in terms of how many shots on target he managed last season. But if a 1 in 3 conversion can be sort of converted up to the Premier League, then yeah, fine. He can kind of get Shea Adams numbers of sort of 8, 9, 10 goals, which I mean that's kind of plugs one gap we had from last time. But obviously everyone remembers we finished bottom last time. We didn't score enough goals and we conceded too many. So you've kind of got to still go one step further, and I think that's where we need to be a little bit smarter. It may well be a case that we're waiting for a deadline day signing where we're getting a loan in from a bigger club who have someone that they're not going to play but will possibly make a difference for us. So I think that's probably what we're going to be looking out for, I imagine. I mean, it sounds like there's possibility of a goalkeeper situation being resolved with Sam Johnston being available from Crystal Palace. The fee of 10 million quid looks perfectly reasonable, I think, for what should be a current England goalkeeper. So I think that would be a massive upgrade on what we have at the moment. I mean, Alex McCarthy, for all that you can say that he deserved a new contract after his performances in the run-in and getting us promoted, we've also seen in pre-season why he wasn't getting in the team in the first place. The passing out from the back in these 2 home games, we've given up chances in our penalty area by him passing the ball more or less straight to the opposition, or under hitting a pass meant for a teammate. So there is a sort of big upgrade to be done there, I think. And if we can get that done for relatively good money, then yeah, I think we should be jumping all over that, really. But the striker situation and the attacking midfielder, I mean, I don't know if the O'Reilly thing's really likely now, given the interest from other clubs. I mean, I've even seen Spurs linked with him, which, I mean, if Spurs get stick their feet in the door, then we might as well walk away now. because we'll have absolutely no chance at the fee and wages that they'd be able to offer. But it's frustrating, but unfortunately our position in the pecking order kind of dictates where we are. And of course the reckless spending 2 years ago we're still effectively paying for it, because that's now impacting our the profit and sustainability regulation sort of levels are impacted heavily by that. So yeah, we've got to get some cash in the door before we can look at bringing more players in, unfortunately.
Alfie, do you feel business could be done this week as we head into the game against Newcastle? It's obviously going to be difficult. Like Steve said, a lot of fans are calling for players and are demanding players, but it isn't that easy, is it? It is difficult. They're trying to run a business here as well, aren't they? And like Steve said, they are paying for some pretty disastrous transfer windows.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the PSR rules are the kicker. Something like 150 million loss over 3 years, and they lost 87 million pounds last summer. They lost, I think, 20 million pounds, something like that before, and obviously they're in the Championship last year, so the money is not there to spend in terms of regulations. But Russell Martin, I spoke to him on after the game on Saturday, and he said that they could still bring in one or two by next week, but he didn't sound that hopeful on it. He said that things have been close and haven't happened this summer, and equally things have come out of nowhere, so we should have to wait and see. But I don't think it's a case where they can't buy anybody for the rest of the summer unless they sell. I think there's got to be room in there somewhere to do something. I hope so, because they need a few things. But like Steve has alluded to, players like Bella Kotchap, who seems to be edging a little bit closer to a move back to Germany, that would be absolutely ideal, whether that's 15, 20 million pounds, whatever it is. That'd be brilliant. Obviously, Paul Nuacci, I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more, but he's not part of the plans, so to say. He's only been played because no one's tried to buy him, or no one's given us a proper fee for him. He's not in Russell Martin's plans. But while he's here and while you're paying him his wages, you might as well use him. He's obviously something a little bit different. If they could sell him, that'd be great. If a big offer comes in for Charlie Alcaraz, I'm so sure they'd be willing to talk about that as well. And then Kamaldeen Sulemana, it seems like he's going to be stuck here just because he's injured again and nobody wants to buy him because he's done nothing for 2 years, which is totally fair enough. Why would you? So that's a bit of a shame, but maybe things will happen. Russell Martin still wants people to come in for Newcastle. He wants additions in the next week. We just have to wait and see. But if they don't, I think it's pretty obvious what their best 11 is. So I'm not too worried about that. Obviously, it needs to be improved, but I think there is a bit of stability to be had in the fact that I think the 11 is really clear. The only debate is, do you start in a 4-3-3 or a 3-5-2, and that would be Jack Stevens or Sam Dalling starting. I think I'd go for the Jack Stevens option. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see.
Be interesting to see how he sets up against Newcastle, Glen. What's your thoughts on how he go into it? Do you think he go with a 5 and try and make it a little bit harder to beat? I'm still not convinced with Jack Stevens playing in that role. Are you?
I think he will want to get his best players on the pitch. It'll be the same thing that he said for the playoff campaign. He'll want to get his best players on the pitch, and Jack Stevens is one of those. Whether as a fan you agree with that or not, that's how Russell Martin sees it. He sees him as the captain. He talking after the Getafe game about him stepping into midfield and doing his thing in there. I traditionally have never been 100% sure on Jack Stevens, but I can kind of see in this in the role that he's got within this team, he's pretty useful there. I think this Newcastle game, I see it almost as a free hit from a result point of view, but not from a performance point of view. We can't go up there and get buried. So I think we'll go up there and we'll try and make it difficult for Newcastle. I mean, the question is, what happens if Newcastle score? Then what do you do? Do you open out and be a bit more expansive, or what? I feel that the problems, if we play 4-3-3, we'll have a problem in midfield because we don't have the legs in there, and they'll get isolated. If we play both Smallbone and Aribo, I just think they'll get pulled around all over the place if we play 4-3-3. That's what Newcastle play, and they will be better at it than we are. That's just a fact. So I feel we have to do something slightly different to what they're doing. So I would go and just try and keep them as quiet as we can. But we have to cause them some sort of problem up front. I mean, I was a little bit was a little bit nonplussed by the positioning of Armstrong and Brereton and Diaz. They seem to both be very wide a lot of the time against Getafe. So at times we were playing sort of 5-5-0 and there was no one in the middle at all. And I'm really not sure you can do that, because otherwise the centre halves, as Steve was alluding to earlier, are just going to push right on, because there's just no reason for them whatsoever to to not do that. So I do think we need to tweak it a little bit, and Armstrong and Brereton and Diaz need to be a little bit more central. But yeah, basically in answer to your question, I think we're going to go with 3 at the back. It will probably be exactly the same starting lineup that we saw against Getafe, and we'll see how it goes. But if we do that, I'm not expecting us to offer a great deal of threat at the front end of the pitch. The only player we seem to have at the moment who can take a player on is Sam Dalling. But his sort of final ball shot, whatever, is not usually great. So whether you'd start a game with him or I find unlikely at the moment. So I think we'll go with him as impact off the bench. But no, three at the back for me.
Steve, we look at the opening 6 games in the Premier League. We always look at the Newcastle game, like Glenn said, as a free hit. But we returned at home to Forest. We got Brentford away, Man United at home, Ipswich at home, and Bournemouth away. We're going to need to get a couple of results in the early weeks, aren't we? Because it took us till Christmas to get 3 wins last time round. How important are these opening games? Obviously, take away the Newcastle game, almost a free hit. We need a performance. But when you look at those opening games, where do you see the points coming?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately you got to look at the home games first and foremost. We were supremely strong for the most part at home last season. And I mean, hopefully the sort of change in the dynamics at St Mary's doesn't have a negative impact. We ultimately just don't know how this, with the away end being moved to the Chapel Kingsland corner, and obviously the northern wall with everybody standing, we don't know how the dynamic's going to work in terms of where the noise is coming from, who's generating it, who's starting things, that sort of thing. We kind of wait and see on that front. But I think, yeah, your home games are always the ones you look at. And I mean, Forest, Man United, Ipswich isn't the worst set of 3 you could begin with, I would say. Forest away from home have tended to be pretty ropey the 2 years they've been up. Ipswich, you would think, I mean, against your fellow promoted side, that's got to be one that you're immediately targeting. Same as it will be when we play Leicester. And I mean, Man United, this current iteration of Man United, you've just got absolutely no idea what you're going to come up against. So if you play well, then there is scope to beat this Man United team, regardless of whether you're any good or not. Yeah, I mean, they are capable of losing to the worst of the worst on their day. So if you can get them into that situation where all of a sudden there's space roaming through the midfield, then that's another potential game where you can get points. And I mean, away from home, I mean, I think we're probably taking a fairly pessimistic view of Newcastle. But then Brentford and Bournemouth, while they're sides that are obviously way ahead of us in terms of sort of development as a club, and I mean, I hate the word, but the sort of project, if you like, with the ownership, Brentford kind of stalled a little bit last season, didn't they? And I think the Ivan Toney situation resolved one way or the other by the end of the month. I mean, he might not be there, and all of a sudden that Brentford team suddenly looks very different, and it's a team that you can go and attack maybe. And I mean, let's be honest, as long as we go to Brentford and just don't lose 3-0 again, please. Yeah. But yeah, that and Bournemouth on the Monday night, local derby, not derby, and you never quite know how those ones are going to go. We've generally got a decent record down there, so yeah, I think you go go down to that one, I think, with a little bit more confidence, just because of past history. But again, you're not going to really know how that's going to look until the previous sort of 4 or 5 games have gone. Nobody's going into the opening game with any real degree of certainty over how anyone's going to shape up in these opening weeks. You've had players that are knackered from the Euros. Some have been away at the Olympics and are going to probably have a couple of weeks off now. So teams aren't going to be finalised until first week of September, really. So actually, this month is possibly an opportunity for sides that are a little bit settled, like we are. I mean, we've had nobody taking an extended break. Jan Bednarek came back early, I think, didn't he? And so therefore, yeah, we're in a settled situation. Some of the teams we're playing might not be. So you got to take that as an opportunity rather than a reason to get despondent. I think I've seen a lot of real sort of negative sort of attitudes from people on social media. I mean, I know Twitter's an absolute cesspool these days, but for all kinds of reasons. But it has been particularly bad in terms of the sort of optimism or lack thereof going into this season. I mean, I don't think anybody's under any illusion that it's going to be a long old season and we're going to have to scrap for every point we earn. But that would have been the same even if we'd finished 8th last season. It's not a new situation for us, and the degree of pessimism has been I found extraordinary given the way that everything finished at the end of May. For it to have turned around so quickly without us even having kicked a football in a competitive game has been pretty wild, I think. Yeah, pretty disappointing, I think, from that extent. So yeah, I mean, I
totally agree with you.
Yeah, we
totally
kind of see how the fan base reacts on next week against Forest. But yeah, it's just give it a bit of time, shall we?
Yeah, absolutely. And home form is going to be key, Glen. Brilliant at the St Mary's back end of last season. The atmosphere created against West Bromwich Albion was quite incredible. The fans come together. Look, there's going to be tough moments, isn't there, this season? But home form will be key if we're going to stay up. How important is it that the fans get behind the players and the manager, and we stick together? Because, like I say, there's going to be some rough moments, isn't there?
Absolutely. And I hope everyone sticks with, what has been created last season and sticks with the team, sticks with the manager. There's not really much point in doing anything else, really, because it doesn't do anyone any good. I know everyone, that whole thing about everyone pays their money, they've got the right to say whatever they want and all that, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't help if in the stadium there's any sort of, let alone protest or anything like that. You have to stick with it. I mean, I think for what Russell Martin did last year and what the players did last year, they've earned the right to sort of like go this season and have everybody back in what they're doing. And that goes for Sport Republic. They give Russell Martin a new contract, so you'd like to think that they're on board for the season with him. And I think as fans, we have to do the same. I mean, obviously we're not going to have the parade and the smoke bombs and all that stuff like every week, like we had against West Brom in the playoffs. But I think everyone appreciates the difference that made, that kind of positivity. And you've only got to look at Wembley as well as it was a real we will not be beaten in this game attitude that came down from the stands. And I think that permeated through to the players as well. They seem to buy into that. And it's been mentioned several times. Alfie's done interviews with various people who've all mentioned, the fans at that West Brom game, the fans at Wembley. So yeah, obviously it's not going to be like that every league game, but you have to try and at least create some sort of unity in the stands to pass on to the players.
No, I totally agree. Now, before we get into our preview of our trip to Newcastle, just a quick shout out to our patron Fantasy Premier League. With the season kicking off this week, it's a great time to join and compete for the entire season. It's open to every TSP patron tier, so you can get involved for as little as £5 per month. We give prizes away at the end of the season, and it's typically pretty competitive. Head over to patreon.com/Total Saints podcast to find out more. And this evening, we're delighted to welcome Sam Dalling from True Faith, the Newcastle United podcast, who's going to give us a lowdown on Newcastle's pre-season and look ahead to the game at St James's Park at the weekend. Sam, thank you very much for joining us. How has pre-season been for you guys?
You're very welcome. It's lovely to be here. I have to say, if you want a real lowdown on pre-season, I'm probably not your man because I tend to ignore friendlies. I actually went to one on Friday night, though, so you're lucky. I happened to be working at Durham in the day and the cricket finished on time. So we are now Cellar Cup champions. We have won our own tournament 2 years in a row, so a little bit of silverware for the cabinets. Look, the lads, they were out in Japan, one of those tours that the manager has no interest in whatsoever, but commercially it's viable. And we had a post-season trip, remember, to Australia. The players...
That was absolutely ridiculous, that.
So footballers, and Alfie will know this, it is not uncommon from the last day of the season a footballer to walk out of the training room with a suitcase because most of them go straight to an airport and go somewhere on holiday. Newcastle did that. They just happened to leave Brentford's community stadium, go to Heathrow and get on a long-haul flight to Australia to play Spurs. I mean, money talks. But results aside, I think pre-season has been decent. Usually you look at the game the Saturday before the first league game and you can think, oh, that's pretty much the team. Problem is, because we played Friday and Saturday night, I've not got that much idea, really.
Be interested to see how you set up at the weekend. Do you feel that Eddie Howe is under a little bit of pressure this season, Sam?
It's interesting. There'll be noise, right? And this is good for Eddie Howe. Maresca and Ten Hag and Arne Slot at Liverpool, right? They will suck in all the noise. But internally, I think he's under massive pressure, actually. And in a good way, he should be under pressure. He has had not quite free rides, but, you remember he came in, kept us up when we looked like we were gone. Then we had that amazing season when we finished in the Champions League. No one expected that ahead of plan. And last year, because of then having had that success and being a stretch squad, and I don't want to stand here and moan about or sit here and moan about injuries. We did have an awful lot of them. So the fact we dropped away last year was actually... he wasn't under that much pressure, but this year we haven't got any European football. Thanks very much to Manchester United for somehow winning the FA Cup. Although, as I'm about to have my first baby, my wife is delighted that I won't be going Thursday night trips to here, there, and everywhere. But if you look at our fixture list, there's no easy games, but we actually don't play anyone else who you'd think would be competing for the Champions League away from home, other than Chelsea until Boxing Day. So if he doesn't start the season very well, like Champions League is a minimum expectation, and I think we should probably be way, way up there in the first half of the season. We may well drop off, but yeah, he's under pressure. It's a long answer to your quite short question.
Is the defence kind of a worry? I mean, obviously you've been linked with Mark Gehi like the last week or so, which I think would be a cracking side, and if you can prize him out of Crystal Palace. But given that, I mean, Eddie Howe's record in the Premier League, I think he's managed eight seasons in the Premier League, and 7 of them his team's conceded 60+ goals. Is that a concern, or is it just a case of last season was such a freak with the injury situation that it's kind of been allowed to slide and just mark it off as a freak and we go again?
It is a worry. The Mark Gehi one, it'd be a fantastic signing. I don't understand it. We went into a Champions League campaign with Jamal Lascelles and Fabian Schär, and now are suddenly having talked about having no money, having to sell a couple of young players on PSR deadline day, are suddenly going to buy basically England's breakout centre-back from the Euros. Like, it makes no sense. I would love it. The defence is the one area I'm not quite sure who's going to line up. There's questions over. I don't think Trippier will be first choice. I think Livramento, man, you know quite well, who was brilliant last year. Lewis Hall came and he has all the. It's not his fault. He's got this massive price tag, but people expected him to be a first team player straight away. He wasn't. Howe didn't trust him defensively, but he started to play back end of next year. But it's definitely an area we need to strengthen. He loves Dan Burn. He's brought Lloyd Kelly in to play that third centre-back / left-back role. I think but I just don't think he'll move away from Burn. Botman's not back. Pope was massive last year. We missed Nick Pope, right? He was out, dislocated his shoulder, freak injury. And it wasn't that Martin Dubravka had many that he should have saved, but there were a good number of goals that Nick Pope would have saved. He's that good a shot stopper. And we missed the cover. Joe Linton barely played last year, and there's very few players that can do what he can do, unless you're looking at spending.
That's been a renaissance and a half, hasn't it?
Oh.
Given his stature 3 years ago.
Yeah, I don't know if you're aware, it was accidental. Kieran Clark got sent off early on for a stupid foul in a game at home to Norwich that we ended up hanging on to a 1-1 draw, and that's why Joe Linton had to move back. And it's been, like, honestly, the player is funny now looking back at it. He is quite something. You can't get the ball off him. Like, physically, he just shrugs off anyone who dares come near him. And the understanding he has through this friendship, basically, with Bruno Guimaraes, they were best men at each other's weddings. We missed him hugely. And if you look at the 2 seasons, right, the season we finished 4th, we won 19 games. Was it 4th or 3rd? I can't remember. We won 19 games. Last season, we won 18 games. The difference was the draws. We just kept getting beat. Away from home last year, we kept getting beat. We didn't have that solidity to hang on to games. So that's what we need to find again.
Is there any areas that you feel that you still need to strengthen? Is there weaknesses in the squad? Yeah,
right winger. There was a few. Right winger. We're still ploughing on. As much as I love Miggy Almiron, he smiles a lot. You can't not like him. He had that one purple patch where he scored 12 goals, I think, in about this many games. It's him or Jacob Murphy at the moment, and they've been talking about a right winger, and neither of those are up to the level that I think Newcastle and certainly the owners want to be. The defensive position would be solved by Mark Gay coming in. We'd all love a proper left back, but I don't think, having spent the money Hall is on Hall, they will do that. He is one for now and for the future. And the talk has been for a while about a backup striker to Alexander Isak, but it's so difficult because you're looking at it. No one we're going to buy is ever going to put Alexander Isak out of the side. He is going to be a proper superstar. He probably won't be with us that much longer, particularly if he shines this season, which I think he will. Callum Wilson, when he's fit, is a blooming good centre forward. Problem is,
he's never fit.
He looks at a weight machine and he gets injured, like any kind of injury imaginable. But then if you're a third choice, what are you going to come in as? Like, are you going to spend money on that kind of player if you can't shift Wilson, which we haven't been able to? We signed that young lad William Asula for 10 million from Sheffield United. I've seen a little bit of him because I do work as a journalist, but I don't know that much around him. So there's weak areas, but it's actually, there's not many places where we need a guaranteed first team player, and that makes it quite difficult to attract people, depth, I would imagine.
It's depth, and you don't want to be signing players that are happy to be second choice, right. Because then you fall into the trap that we did. I mean, God, when we got relegated, not last year, the time before, where we basically bought squad fillers, and most of them just didn't give a toss.
Yeah, but I look at the depth in Newcastle's squad. I mean, just off the top of my head, really, Trippier, Botman, Barnes, Wilson, Tonali to come back, maybe Willock, Kelly. That's a lot of good players who would, every single one of those I've just mentioned, Kraft, Dubravka, every single one of those would improve Saints squad. So it's not like the worst situation in the world that Newcastle find them in. But yeah, the right wing, I can see that as being an area where you don't really have anyone. Does Harvey Barnes play the other side? He's left-sided.
No, he's left-sided. He was, he just stood awkwardly at Sheffield United and broke his foot, and that was the last we saw of him. He's been probably told by the club's media team to come out and say he's looking for a Gordon-like season this year. I mean, he could be brilliant. Howe's reluctant to move Gordon from left to right, I think. I'll call you up on that. Martin Dubravka would not improve your team. I promise you that. Again, as much as I like him, but he played on Saturday. He played on Saturday. I mean, I was there. I witnessed on Friday night John Ruddy play for Newcastle United, which I think he's going to turn into a bit of a cult figure. Like,
when did that happen?
In the summer, picked him up.
Jesus.
Having been relegated by. There's a thing now, isn't there? They like.
Well, it's the third choice, the aging pro who's happy to
Yeah.
Yeah, be
It's
third
not
choice and just take corners in the warm up.
It's not even that. We've got 5. I read a piece about it. Clubs like a big goalkeeping pool because you need goalkeepers to play in the games, the training games, while the actual goalkeepers are off doing their proper work. That's why Tom Heaton went out with the England squad to the Euros.
I was going to say that.
You need 5 goalkeepers. It's a weird situation. So we've got Mark Gillespie, who will never play for Newcastle United, but I mean, fair play to him. Apparently, he's a very good social secretary. He sorts out all the stuff like that. But yeah, there's a few. I mean, but so it does feel a little bit stronger. Midfield, we're very strong because Tonali, like, what can you do? Like, there's no way. Well, some people say we should have known about it. I don't think you can know about that. So in midfield, we're pretty strong. It was sad to see Anderson go. They didn't want him to go really, but they had to sort the books out. But we signed the Vlachodimos from Forest, the goalkeeper. Dubravka's still there. Signed Ruddy. Got this Gillespie lad. So yeah, there is depth. But then at the same time, had we got into Europe, Matt Ritchie and Paul Dummett would have been offered new deals to ensure that we filled the quotas. So it's like, and neither of them. Ritchie's just been picked up by Portsmouth. Dummett hasn't got a club yet. So it just shows you that it's still a transitional period.
I mean, Ryan Fraser might have been getting a game at that point.
I would love to see Ryan Fraser get a game. He would be our best right winger. He'd be my first choice right winger. He had a really good end to a season and then pulled his hamstring right at the back end of it. He and Eddie Howe do not like each other. I think there was a lot of leaks about team news and various things season before last, and the general consensus was Ryan Fraser. He's not allowed in the building. He's not allowed near.
He played no games at all. No games at all.
No, he's not allowed to train with them. He's not. Wow. Him and Howe. He won't. He would genuinely. I'm not taking them, Mick. He would be our best right winger, but him and Howe, it's not happening. So Jamal Lewis, who couldn't get a game for Watford last year, he's played at left back in pre-season, but Ryan Fraser, not even in the training.
Be interesting to see what happens with Ryan Fraser. He was brilliant down here for us. He gave 110% when he played. Didn't always start, but I was impressed with him. I hope that we go and bring him in, but there's a lot of talk that he needs a settlement from Newcastle before he exits his contract. So we'll wait and see what happens. You spoke about Champions League being the target. Do you feel it's realistic, Sam?
Yeah, and it's going to sound like arrogant, and people might not like it, but there is depth there, and Spurs have got Europe, and they are chaotic as well. The Spurs came up to Newcastle twice actually and got ripped apart because they didn't know how to play. Howe is a training ground manager. He loves a Monday to Friday to work out a game plan. He didn't have that last year. He does have that this year. And we're a momentum side, a bit like you last year, actually. We can go on these runs where we will win 8 or 9 games in a row. And if we play the big sides in the middle of those, we'd back ourselves to beat them. We can also, last year, we had some terrible runs where we looked absolutely naff and completely on empty. We had a week where we were down to the bare bones, but in 7 days, we beat Arsenal and Manchester United at home and had that PSG game. I don't know if you might remember it, where we were 1-up until they got a penalty that wouldn't have been given in England.
A laughable penalty that was.
It was. But the following week, we then went to Everton and lost 3-0 on the Thursday and 4-1 or something at Spurs, 5-1 on the Sunday because we were just on empty. So, as I said, the fixture list is relatively kind. And much could go wrong. But yes, at the start of the season, there's plenty of optimism. There's plenty of players that if they stay fit, they are capable as being as good a side as any outside Manchester City and Arsenal. And I'm not saying they will, but in that cluster, there is no reason with a fair wind why Newcastle cannot finish the best of the rest. But there's also no reason why there's 6 or 7 other clubs that can't do that. But Villa have got, Villa are great, but they've got 8 European games minimum.
Spurs Villa will finish 8th this season. I think they'll struggle with the extra games.
It will be that little bit harder for them. Sam, it's been a pleasure having you on the Total Saints podcast today. But before you go, it's our time to do our predictions for the weekend's fixture. So I'm going to get a prediction off all you guys, if that's okay. As the guest, Sam, I'm going to go with you first. Can I get a score prediction from yourself for the weekend's game?
Yes, you can. I am going to make myself very unpopular and say Newcastle United 3, Southampton 0.
Alfie, how about you?
Alfie needs to unmute himself.
Sorry about that. Just so surprised.
Schoolboy
I
error.
was going to say, you're not going to be that
Come to you
unpopular,
first.
Sam, because I'm also going for a 3-0 win for Newcastle. But I would like to preface it by saying that I don't think this spells doom for Southampton. I think Newcastle are just in a completely different stratosphere for this game. And it's at St. James's Park. It's the first game of the season. It's going to be electric. They've got so many good players. So it's going to be the 4 or 5 games after this where, the real litmus test for Saints. But yeah, I think a 3-0 win for Newcastle, and then maybe an Alexander Isak hat-trick for my captain of my fantasy team as well, potentially.
Glenn, what's your score prediction?
I just hope that the game itself, we go up there and put on some sort of performance. You can get beat 3-0 and it be game over after 47 minutes or whatever, and then the rest of the game is just players walking around and it'd be rubbish. Or you can actually cause Newcastle a few problems. So I hope we can go and do that. I'm not terribly optimistic that we're going to get anything concrete out of this game. So I will go for a slightly more optimistic 2-0 defeat.
And how about you, Steve?
Well, I'm going to be the most optimistic out of all of us and think that we'll actually score. But yeah, defensively, I just don't see us being able to cope over the full 90 minutes with the combination of Isak, Bruno Guimaraes, Joe Linton, assuming
Jacob Murphy as well, 6 goals in pre-season.
Jacob Murphy, great. Hopefully he gets sent off and we can wave him off. Just to kind of,
I forgot about that. Yes,
just to kind of square that circle and just end it all. Yeah, I mean, I think realistically, as Glenn said, you go up there hoping that you can put a performance in. If you manage to get a result, great, absolute bonus. But those aren't the games that are going to decide our fate this season. So yeah, just a performance, create some chances, give the travelling fans something to shout about. But ultimately, I think they'll probably be too good for us. 3-1.
Yeah, time for my prediction. Unfortunately, I don't think we're getting anything out of it. I don't think we're quite ready to play a Newcastle side right now. I think it's a really tough opening game. We got beaten 4-1 by Tottenham in the first game last time round in the Premier League under Hasenhüttl at the time. I'm going to go with a 4-1, actually. I think we will score Adam Armstrong to set his season up. I think he'll do okay this season, but I think it's a real tough one for us. Sam, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Total Saints podcast today. Thank you very much for joining us. Good luck for the rest of the season, and I'm sure we'll catch up with you later on in the season when you head down south to St Mary's.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank
good luck after Saturday and up until we come down to St Mary's.
And for everyone that's tuning in live on the show, get involved in the comments box below if you're watching on YouTube. Give us your score predictions, or if you tune in at a later date, we'd love to hear your thoughts on how you feel we'll do at the weekend. Right, guys, before I let you go, I want to catch up on a couple of other bits. Steve, we have VAR again this season. I want to get your thoughts on all of it. Alfie and Glenn as well. How are we feeling about VAR next season?
Can't wait. I mean, it's interesting, actually, looking back at all our games in the Championship. I don't think there were that many goals that we scored that would have subsequently been ruled out.
Spoke without a penalty for Jan Bednarek doing a rugby tackle, but
yeah,
that's the biggest one.
Yeah, there'd have been a few sort of occasional incidents, but it wasn't like the year we went down where there seemed to be something stupid in every game, whether it was at the attacking end or the defensive end of the pitch. I just hope that it's a little bit lighter touch, or actually more that the referees apply it a little bit more sensibly. Because I mean, I've always said that I like the concept of it, but unfortunately, it's being implemented by idiots, and that kind of comes from the top of both the Premier League and PGMOL, in that they've basically given the referees directives to referee the game completely differently to any other league in the world. And that's basically why they end up looking stupid.
Steve, question for you. What's going to be for the first 3 weeks of the season, what's going to be the new on-trend referee thing to do? Is it going to be 15 minutes at a time, wearing blue boxes? What's going to be?
From what I saw an article a few days ago, I think the topic is dangerously for us is going to be defensive shirt pulling from set pieces.
No, okay.
So guarantee Jan Bednarek gives away a penalty in the first 2 weeks. From that, but I mean the thing that absolutely fascinates me and baffles me in equal parts about VAR this season is we've got semi-automated offsides coming in, which is great. It will speed up the process much quicker to get a decision, so you're not waiting around for ages, regardless of how close the decision is. You get the decision straight away. The only things that take time is if there's like interference or some player stood, like the ones where the keeper stood in the eye line, the goalkeeper and that sort of stuff. But that's supposedly not going to be ready until like October. I mean, I just find this staggering that with all the money that the Premier League has got, that they've not been able to get this system in place for the opening day. And it compromises the integrity of the league. You can't be playing under different playing conditions for
but they don't care about that.
For 3/4 of the season. It's ridiculous.
See the FA Cup every year. Some games play with VAR, some aren't. It's crazy. I totally agree. Yeah, but it'll happen.
Yeah, I mean, I would say for the FA Cup, it should basically draw a line that from the quarterfinals onwards, you use it. Doesn't matter what ground you're playing at, you get it done. You pay the money.
You can. That's the thing. They can't get it done, can they? They can't install it on a week's notice.
Well, it shouldn't be that difficult. It's a load of extra cameras. They've already got the data feed, the satellite streaming and stuff going into Stockley Park, because that's where the iFollow streaming service was run from. So they've already got the data connections. It's just the will to do it. And frankly, the FA haven't got that, unfortunately.
My opinion on VAR, and I'm sure that you can give me a million studies to say that it works. And it does work in terms of correct decisions. They get 10% more decisions probably correct than they would if they didn't. I just think it's crap. The season in the Championship without it was fantastic. This year is going to be terrible. It's just going to be boring. And the semi-automated offsides are massive because I didn't think in the Euros it wasn't too disruptive until the English referees got hold of it. So I'm happy for that to come in because the offside waiting for things that you can see clearly is boring. But like you said, there's going to be re-refereeing games, making rules up as I go along. I'm very much not looking forward to that aspect of being back in the Premier League.
No, it's important from a fan, match-going fan perspective. Not having it is brilliant. The ball goes in the net. Linesman ain't got his flag up.
You're nuts.
It's a goal. Yeah. Go nuts. Great. I always go back whenever I talk about this. I always go back to the Theo Walcott goal at Brighton, last game of the season. We'd already been relegated. 2-0 down, back to 2-1. Walcott scores. It's like the first moment of proper joy of that entire crap season, and it gets disallowed for a toenail. And there's no camera angle picture that says that's offside. It's just garbage. So, as a match going fan, I think it's horrific, but it's here to stay. We've got to put up with it. It's just one of those things. Let's just hope we score enough goals for it to be relevant to us.
Yeah. Final one for you guys before you go. What are your expectations for the season, Alfie?
Good question. Really good question, actually. My expectations for the season are they will play a certain way. I think they have been brave. I think they will play this way. They're going to play out from the back. They're going to have centre midfielders starting at centre back or left backs rolling into midfield. I think it's going to be difficult. I think there's going to be some heavy beatings at the hands of the good teams, starting with Newcastle, continuing with potentially Spurs, obviously Man City, things like that. But those matches against the top six do not define a bottom 10 finish. Ultimately, what matters is the teams that are in and around you. Nottingham Forest, Brentford this season, obviously the other two promoted teams. So my expectation is that they compete in those games and they beat the Nottingham Forest, the Brentfords. We'll talk about last season going down and going out without a whimper, losing every game 1-0, not having a shot on target, and you just think this is miserable. Like this is truly
2 wins
miserable.
at St Mary's. 2 wins.
Yeah, it's awful, and I don't think that'll be the case this time because I expect that this squad will fight for each other. I think they've got a real unity amongst them, but as Steve said earlier, that's not enough on its own. So I think if they finish 17th, I'll be absolutely delighted for them. I'll be really pleased. I think that's the target, that's the aim, and I think that's more than achievable. Like Glenn and Steve said earlier, actually, there is a sort of a wave of negativity at the moment because of the fact that there haven't been sort of £20 million marquee signings since the 2 loan players who don't necessarily improve the squad. But I've got a good feeling about it in some ways, and I think that it's an exciting way of playing. I think they're brave manager, brave coach. So I think they can go and do something. And look, if they finish 17th, I'll be very, very happy with that. So yeah, I think that's the target for everybody.
Glenn, what about yourself? Put the same question to you. What are your expectations for the season?
Much the same as what Alfie said there. I think it's important to make a distinction between where the squad is now and where it might be in a couple of weeks' time. We'd all like to have the striker, the attacking midfielder, the winger, the goalkeeper. We'd all like to have those in for the first game. It looks unlikely that we will. We've been talking a lot about the season 2 years ago when we played Spurs in that game. We set up 5-3-2. We had players like Jan Valery, Moussa Djenepo, people like that playing. And I remember going to that game and thinking, we've got some work to do in the transfer window, before it shuts. And what we did then that year was made it worse. We sold Oriol Romeo. We got rid of Fraser Forster. We brought in Ainsley Maitland-Niles. It was just a disaster. We had the opportunity and we made a total and utter balls of it. So there is opportunity to change things. So the first 3 games are played before the transfer window closes. As we've said, Newcastle game, Forest we could do with a result. Brentford we could do with being competitive and maybe getting a result there. But hopefully things will look a little bit more optimistic in terms of the size of the quality of the squad. By the time, there's going to be a hell of a lot going on. Loan deals. For example, just one off the top of my head, we're looking for a striker. Chelsea are going to be punting players out left, right, and centre between now and the end of the window. Who's to say we're not going to pick up someone like Amanda Brozier for not very much money? Lukaku would be available. So lots of things can change between now and then. So I don't really have expectations at this point because of everything that's just been said there. Ask me in 3 weeks' time. But we know that everyone at the club's geared up to try and finish 17th. That's the way. Yeah. That's the way it is. And 10 months of the season, win 1 game a month, and we'll be more or less there. So that's kind of the way I'm going to try and keep looking at it certainly for the first half of the season and see where we are. But so sorry, I didn't actually answer that, but never mind, move on.
Steve, a lot of the mainstream pundits are saying there's a lot of comparisons with us and Burnley. Will the manager adapt? Your expectations, do you think the manager will adapt? Do you think we have a Burnley type situation?
Well, no, because we kept the loan players that got us promoted, the key ones anyway. So no, I think those comparisons are not quite on point. I mean, there's a certain comparison in terms of a perceived sort of stubbornness in terms of the way the manager wants to play. But we already saw last season that actually he can see what's in front of his face.
Yeah.
And he will make changes accordingly. We changed the system twice at big moments last season. We changed it once after the Ipswich game, I think. Middlesbrough game was the first game where we actually played a slightly different way. And then the week after that, we beat Leeds and went on that massive unbeaten run. And then he changed it again after that god awful home game against Stoke at the end of the season. We went to Elland Road, beat them relatively comfortably, and we haven't looked back since. So yeah, I think there will be a constant assessment of what works best for the players that we've got over the course of the season. And I don't think Russell Martin will shy away from doing that. Because he's shown in his first season with us that he's willing and capable to do that. So yeah, I don't think it's the same sort of dogma situation with someone like Vincent Kompany, who, and also the thing with Burnley was that they rotated through all of their players, constantly chopping and changing throughout the season, with a view to trying to work out sort of on the fly what was best for them. Whereas I think the vast majority of us, I think if you asked people to name their starting 11 for Saturday, I think most would get 9, maybe 10 names at least.
I agree.
So I think we're pretty settled, which Burnley certainly weren't last season.
Russell manager as manager of Bayern Munich this time next year, then.
Yeah.
We've got the BBC Fans Forum tomorrow. Any of you guys heading down to that tomorrow evening at St Mary's?
I'll be there. Yeah.
Nah, not for me.
It's interesting. They've officially launched Mark Bitcon as the director of football operations now, where he was previously the performance director of Sport Public, where he's now working for the club. So I wonder if that's the sort of leadership debate settled now. I suppose with a week at the start of the season, it probably does make sense. I'll be looking forward to that. I mean, it's going to be interesting. I think the problem with these fans forums is that obviously in the build up to them, a lot of people have really brave ideas and brave questions, but when you actually get sat down in front of them,
they don't get asked.
You don't tend to get those questions asked. So
no, you get people giving an hour-long spiel of how long they've supported Saints for, and now can I please ask why are the pies £5.80?
And when the stadium's going to be expanded?
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
the bar prices need to be discussed.
That's almost a valid question with a season ticket waiting list all of a sudden, but. It's
it's something in the long-term plan, isn't it? With Phil Parsons and that, it's clearly something they want to do in the long term. But yeah, Glenn mentioned the bar prices. I looked it down. So what's it, £7.20 for a pint now? Is that right? Was it £6.20?
It was expensive.
It was in the sixes. I can't remember.
Yeah, it's a little pricey, isn't it? But also, I couldn't find the new lager.
Steve won't know because it was my round.
Yeah. Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. On that note, that's all for this week's episode. You can follow the Total Saints podcast on all the social media platforms. It's at Total Saints Pod. Do check out the TSP merch store, shop.totalsaints.co.uk, including our new range dedicated to Flynn Downs. We're also on Patreon, where you can support the podcast with a monthly contribution. Just visit patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast. Each of our tiers comes with its own perks, including weekly shoutouts for those patrons in our Francis Benali or Mick Shannon tiers. So we've got a few names to read out, and I hope that I get them all correct. There's a few here. So thank you to Dave Melton, Andy Hollis, Anthony Thompson, Gavin Ford, James Harron, Nicky Nicholson, Southampton NY, Drew Dyer, James Kibley, and Mike E in the Francis Benali tier. And also to Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Nick Hillingston, Phil Cook, Nick Reed, Paul Stewart, Phil Horsup, Matt Hall, and Mark Littlewood, and also James Bobin, who are in our Mick Shannon tier. My massive thanks go out to Steve, Glenn, and Alfie. Thank you for having me on the podcast. They have absolutely enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we'll be back next week at the usual time for the next episode.